And also joining us this afternoon, Pulse Asia President Tito Ronald Holmes.
The other Tito Ronald. Na-miss mo lang tawagin
The other Tito.
si Tito.
The other Tito Ronald. Tito Ronald.
Hi, Professor.
Ay, basta hindi ako heckler. Isa lang ang heckler.
Isa lang yung heckler. Eh. No, let's give him that title na. Baka magtamo pa yun eh.
Okay. Prof, so Pulse Asia released a survey covering many topics recently, no? Just a few days ago. The first thing I wanted to touch on was obviously the one that the big issue of the day, which is corruption. 54% of the respondents ranked inflation as the top national concern. No surprises there kasi inflation has always been a top concern, especially leading up to the midterm elections. What's notable is yung corruption naging number 2 na. It became 51% cited fighting corruption as an urgent concern. I remember earlier this year and also even last year, I believe corruption would have been 4th or 5th place. Tama? What do you make of this?
In the top, always in the top 5.
So ngayon number 2 na tayo.
Now number 2. It used to be in the top 3 prior to the Aquino administration, given the scandals under the Arroyo administration and given the emphasis of the former president in terms of fighting corruption also.
So what do we make of this now that corruption is now back in the top 2 of national concerns?
It only means that people really have been attentive to all of the exposés that have come out recently with regard to the flood control project. Since we did the survey, maybe there was about a month and a half already of news reports with respect to anomalous ghost projects, substandard projects coming off from the State of the Nation address of Bongbong Marcos. So, yeah, and the scale of corruption that has been exposed is to the extent that, you're talking about billions of pesos, district engineers pocketing and using billions of pesos in casinos. So this is something that we've not heard of in the past. The last scandal we had with regard to the PDAF, the pork barrel in 2013, we were talking about millions of pesos. This time it's billions.
I remember that, sir, kasi yung 10 billion pesos ng pork barrel scam was already parang a
Malaki na at that time.
a breathtaking amount already at that time. Now we're looking at trillions possibly. Parang biglang lumiit yung pork barrel scam.
Insertions of more than 142 billion. So this is all of those news reports eventually lead the public. One of the things that we found in the survey is essentially that, and this has not been done for quite some time, people really think that corruption is normal and corruption is pervasive. And that's a problem. We have not even gotten to the other forms of corruption that have happened or that are happening at present.
Professor, ang tinitingnan ngayon ng mga tao is the impact of this dismay of the people over corruption sa political climate natin. Kasi we're also looking at your surveys and the other pollsters. Pare-pareho mukhang may tama pareho yung dalawang pinakamalalaking kampo, no? Both the Marcoses and the Dutertes, pareho silang sa puli. Can you expound more on this?
Tama, if you look at the performance ratings and trust ratings about the president and the vice president, you will see a pattern there. Essentially, that the president is not doing well in the Visayas Mindanao, but the vice president is also getting lower approval and trust in NCR and the Balas of Luzon. So you have a geographic division. No? The only reason why the vice president's trust and performance or approval have not declined is largely because of the almost universal trust that she obtained in Mindanao. So there's this geographic polarization. I would not really call it polarization, but the tendency of people in Mindanao, maybe because they come from the same ethno-linguistic group and geographic area, to just simply show appreciation, approval, and trust towards the vice president. She's not safe from all of the accusations, of course. She refused to be held accountable for explaining the use of the confidential funds in 2023 also.
So that kind of
Actually,
skews...
hindi pa siya tinatamaan, Hindi pa siya tinatamaan directly na itong scandal na to,
hindi
Kaya,
pa siya
kaya, yeah.
Di pa siya tinatamaan namin, but if we just simply trace back, during the latter part of 2024, when the Quadcom was going through hearings and the Good Governance Committee in the House was investigating the use of intelligence funds, that was the time that we saw her approval and trust dip. She was able to recover after the arrest of the former president, and that might be because of the narrative that they have woven with regard to
Sympathy.
the kidnapping and sympathy. And she has retained the trust and approval rating that she's had since March 2025. So she has been relieved of the pressure, essentially, because of these exposés, no? That are largely brought about, precipitated by a statement coming from the president with regard to flood control projects during the State of the Nation address.
But also, sir, I suppose kasi whatever numbers we were talking about last year dun sa kanyang confidential funds, I'm talking about the VP, of course, they're obviously dwarfed by the amounts that we're seeing now, involving people who are nowhere near the rank of the president or the vice president, simple district engineers down the line. Di ba?
Yeah.
So that kind of, I suppose that,
And the web is big.
and it's getting bigger. So I'm wondering lang, of course, I don't know if you have any numbers on this, pero would the enormity of the flood control scandal basically shift attention away from the VPs, as you said nga kanina, nag-dip yung ratings ni VP because of the confidential funds issue. Eh. But would this new scandal shift the attention away from last year's big issue, and therefore insulate her from further dips?
Unfortunately, Bob, that's what has happened, no? Since March. Essentially, the attention has been diverted away from the impeachment, away from the use of the confidential funds, a series of events, and most especially given the enormity of the pilferage, no, or plunder of public funds that have been exposed related to the flood control, health centers, school buildings, farm-to-market roads. And I'm pretty sure that there will be other things that will come out. So, and it's not a question of the amount, no? Because if you cannot explain how you spent 125 million in 11 days, that to me is an important refusal to be held accountable for the misuse of public funds that the Vice President has to explain. And maybe that's one thing that has to be pursued by agencies in government. It's not just flood control projects, but also everyone else who has really abused their power.
You're saying that should still be pursued, pero do you think that people would still be that interested? I get what you mean, sir. I mean, I get what you mean.
Yeah,
Pero
I also get what you mean. You know, parang it's the pot calling the kettle black. Also, parang, that's a problem here. You know, you're pursuing me for 125 million, but
Yes,
you're a
sir.
district engineer that has amassed about 1.4 billion in terms of casino
and they can spend
earnings.
half a billion in one night. Di ba?
Well,
Yeah, so
more
but
than-
it doesn't take out the responsibility of any public official in terms of really explaining why the funds that they have been allocated are not spent or how it was spent. No? And she has refused to be held accountable for that.
More than the question of whether the public would still be interested, that's beside the point. I almost feel, kasi okay, if you're not interested, that's fine. They still have to pursue, get to the bottom of this case, right? But the problem the other problem I see is yung trust in the institutions is very low at the moment. So I'm looking at the numbers for the Senate. Big trust is what, 37%. Office of the Ombudsman, 39%. 23% lang yung big trust for the ICI, and DPWH is at 7%. I don't know if you've been tracking them before, or this is the first time you've tracked trust ratings for the DPWH. But what does it say about us that the people's trust in the institutions are this dismal?
And Regina, maybe I should add there that media is the only one that obtained majority trust with regard to addressing the problem of corruption, and I hope that
Kasi
media
kami
will
umaamin kami. Madali kami
Hindi, ah.
umamin.
I hope that I hope
Nagre-retract
that
kami
media
pag mali.
media will live up to that trust, no, even improve it.
But I will
But it
also
only
say that I will also
yeah,
say we're majority by only marginally 51% yung big trust sa
but
media. That's
but
like we just got over the line there.
and there's about 3 out of 10 are undecided with
Yeah.
regard to trusting media,
Yeah.
for that matter. But what it points to is that when we ask this question regarding these institutions and their trustworthiness with regard to addressing the problem of corruption in flood control projects, it's specific to flood control projects. So we have not done this in the past. It only suggests that those that have investigated so far, there's ambivalence on the part of the population rather than trust. Because if you look at the Senate, 36% are undecided whether to trust or not. The House of Representatives, that's 40%. The Ombudsman, 43%. So whatever these institutions would do, I mean, ICI is 56%. If the Independent Commission for Infrastructure will not open up their meetings, this will definitely retain that ambivalence or even lead towards distrust, because the call has been to make public, live stream at least a number of their meetings so that we know what has happened there, whether there was someone who went berserk in a meeting or whatever statements any of the officials, because up to this point we have not heard from them except maybe from the spokesperson.
Professor, mukhang you've mentioned na mukhang nakalimutan nga si VP, no? Dahil sa enormity of this scandal. But what if the scandal also points to Davao City and people known to be close to her? Halimbawa, yung mga kapatid niya. And si Bongo, although they don't see eye to eye, mukhang nakatuon na sa kanya ngayon yung pansin eh. You think magiging Teflon pa rin si VP? Can she isolate? Can she distance herself from the scandal? Gusto ko sakali lang na mapunta na sa Davao yon.
Hindi natin alam kung saan, anong patutunguhan ng mga investigasyon sa ngayon. No? Kasi lumalabas ngayon na tungkulin yan amin ng ombudsman, di ba? Well, let's see what the ombudsman will do. Essentially, I think the job of the ombudsman now is quite critical for our democratic processes in terms of security and accountability. Let's hope that the ombudsman, I heard Ombudsman Remulla saying that they would really carefully study this and file the cases when they have sufficient evidences to file the case. So let's see, because the ombudsman eventually will be the institution that would pursue all of these cases against erring officials, including those that are linked to the vice president.
And it's interesting that you mentioned yung panahon ni GMA. Kasi nasustain siya, no? Nasustain siya for several years yung galit ng tao. And it was reflected in the election of course, no, although, of course, may impact yung pagkamatay ni Cory Aquino, but it was a sentiment against corruption, di ba? Ang tanungan ngayon ng mga tao, can we sustain this outrage to affect the 2028 vote? Sa tingin niyo, as a pollster, and considering the previous experience?
As a pollster and as a political scientist, I hope it will be sustained, Hami. We had a question in the corruption module where we asked whether rallies or protests can help ensure the accountability of officials. The polarities are in agreement to it, although 31% are disagree, which means that they have reservations about the impact of these rallies. But that doesn't mean that they will not in any way this doesn't indicate that they will not participate or they will not in any way express their protest, especially come 2028. But the thing here is that how do we make sure that all of these things that eventually reflect on the lack of that dishonesty on the part of a number of officials would eventually register in the ballot box in 2028. One of the striking things that we got in the survey was that 90% are saying that there's collusion among members of the executive, the legislature, and private contractors. you may even extend that, not just private contractors, even the private sector for that matter, with regard to other transactions involving government. So if you have 9 out of 10 Filipinos saying that there's collusion and 97% saying there's pervasive corruption, I hope that these expressions of opinion would eventually carry over to 2028 and that more Filipinos would think twice in terms of voting for individuals who are linked to all of these illicit, nefarious, and really objectionable activities or actions.
Pero sir, medyo madaya yung sagot niyo kasi when Ami asked you if we can sustain the outrage, ang sagot niyo, I hope so. I'm wondering if you have any data that
Trend.
may show
Trending.
na
Is it gaining momentum? Is it slowing down?
Is it going to take root among voters? And
Is there going to be a trigger?
Oh, kasi for example, sabi niyo kanina, one of the things that you found in the survey is that people think corruption is normal and pervasive. I don't know how you define normal or how people in the surveys define normal. Is it normal meaning na it's always happening or is it normal na parang it's acceptable na? Is it normal na tipong we're resigned already to it, that it's going to be there all the time? Yun po. So what do you think?
Well, hindi naman siya acceptable, no? It's just that they think that corruption is something that you will see, in the normal course of politics. Whether it's acceptable or not, definitely there are other indicators that people do not necessarily accept it. For example, when we ask them whether they think that the ones involved in these anomalous transactions will be punished, their aspiration or their hope, 7 out of 10, is that they will be punished. Now, Ed, in relation to your question, if they do not see anyone being punished, then that would definitely spark more outrage, right? As I mentioned in one interview, if you're cited in contempt in the House or the Senate, you will be put in detention. And some of them are put in detention in Pasay City Jail. If, for example, some of those who are accused eventually are found to be liable and are issued warrants of arrest, and they're not necessarily just small fish or fingerlings, I hope that the big fish would not be put in the PNP Custodial Center, but be put in the same Manila City Jail or Quezon City Jail. And that will testify to the sincerity of government. But
Yes,
of
sir.
course, that's a hope, Ed. And here, that's too much to wish for, given all of our
Hope springs
history,
eternal.
given all of our history in terms of where people who were in power, were eventually placed when they were charged and arrested.
Yes, sir. Pero sir, in line with that, there are so many times in our history, recent history, where we've seen so much outrage, and people actually were convicted and all that, but they were almost elected again as president. For example, Erap. He was number 2 in 2010. If not for Pinoy and Cory Aquino dying, he could have been the president all over again after being convicted of plunder.
That's where the institution that is most trusted by a majority of the individuals, can definitely assist media in terms of sustaining.
So it's our job.
In terms of sustaining the report with regard to all of these things that people have to be remembering.
Si Prof naman, binigyan pa tayo ng
because
trabaho. But,
Pero,
it's not just
Professor,
media.
it's also because hindi sila napaparusahan eh. So people think okay na eh. They don't go to jail, they are pardoned. Kaya yung tatanong ko, paano kapag walang naparusahan dito? Will we see outrage fatigue? I call it outrage fatigue, and people will say, balik na lang, pare-pareho lang naman yung mga yan. Is there a big danger of that happening?
I think that would be the risk that government will get into. Because as I said, Ami, you have 70% thinking that the people who are liable should be punished. If no one is punished, and I think people are aware of who are the ones who have made the decisions here. They cannot escape the responsibility and say, no, it was just this other person who made the decision. It's just the Appropriations Committee chair. How can the leader of the lower house not know what the chair of a committee has done or is doing? So in that sense, there has to be they have to be answerable, no? For their actions,
Prof?
whether it's an act of omission or commission for that
Yeah.
matter.
Prof, sorry, we're running out of time, but I just have to ask you this. Coming back to the numbers for the institutions, 23% lang yung big trust for the ICI. At first, I thought, okay, maybe it's because it's a new body, people don't recognize it yet. Pero actually, yung awareness niya is 93% amongst your respondents. So the awareness is high, except the trust is low as an institution. And you already said that, okay, people want to see the hearings live stream, but is this the only reason that there's such little trust for the ICI as an independent commission? Or meron ba kayong more of a qualitative data around why people don't trust this institution?
Well, the ICI, the majority opinion is more in terms of ambivalence. They cannot say they trust or distrust the ICI. So that means it would really depend on what the ICI would do or has been doing. And hopefully they do come up with live streaming of their meetings. It might improve the trust rating of the Independent
Okay.
Commission for Infrastructure.
So you're saying...
And then if they start charging people also, passing on the reports to the DOJ or the Ombudsman, then that would mean, as Ami pointed out, if yung parusa matagal pa yan Pero yung ma-charge lang sila, ma-arresto lang sila, malagay lang sila sa kung saan dapat sila ang kinalalagyan. Siguro yun na yung panimula na maniniwala ang tao na pwedeng pagkatiwalaan ulit ang mga institusyon ng pamahalaan.
Wala masyadong bearing yung the people that were put in there.
No, not so much, because it's really a question of what would be the indicator that they're doing their job, that they're pursuing people who should be held accountable for all of these corrupt activities. The best indicator for that is really people are charged and arrested. And so far, we have not seen anyone arrested except for those who were cited in contempt in the Senate.
Ng Senate. Pero is it also a factor na hindi sila kilala ng tao? Yung mga ICI. They don't talk to anybody. Except Babe Singson,
Except
of
Babe
course.
Singson, yeah.
Well, as a group, awareness is at 93%, but that's superficial when we ask them, no? But of course, they will have to be, well, like the Ombudsman, for example, right now, the Ombudsman has been engaging in regular media interviews. I think the ICI should do the same. Maybe there should be more detailed reports about what they are going to do, rather than simply echoing what another agency has done. For example, the last time I listened to the ICI, they were just repeating what DPWH Secretary Vince Dizon said with regard to the number of those projects. So the redundancy is something that doesn't help the Independent Commission for Infrastructure.
Can you repeat that, Prof? About the part about them needing to give more interviews? Because honestly, it's very, very hard to get them. I mean, we've been trying. And as you said, it's not very transparent at this point. But we shall leave that there. Thank you so much for joining Storycon today. Ronald Holmes, Pulse Asia President. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.